It's your basement thing.
Just take that wall down and kick that out there.
All right, so we're gonna start, today we're gonna cover Rule 26, 27, and 28. We're gonna start with 27, because that's how it was in my notes from last time. I think that's how they covered it in the rules class, hopefully, but that's based on my recollection. That's
how you're covering it, and since you run the class, that's fine.
Exactly, yeah. So we'll start with 27, ball lost or out of bounds, or a provisional ball. So most of this stuff we shouldn't have to spend too much time on, but we will cover a few things with provisionals that are a little bit tricky, that don't really happen too much, but just want to bring to everyone's attention. So a lost ball, there's 5 ways that a ball can be lost. You'll notice that none of these involves any kind of verbal statement. So a player can never declare the ball lost. It only happens when one of these 5 things happen. So first one is, it's not found or identified within 5 minutes after the player's side or his or their caddies have begun to search for it. So again, that could be a situation where if the caddy is ahead, that clock starts ticking once that caddy gets in the area that the ball is most likely to be. The player has made a stroke at a provisional ball from the place where the original ball is likely to be, or from a point nearer the hole than that place. The player has put another ball into play under stroke and distance. Fourth one, the player has put another ball into play because it is known or virtually certain that the ball, which has not been found, has been moved by an outside agency, is in an obstruction, an abnormal ground condition, or in a water hazard. So we've talked a lot about that known or virtual certainty. So once we have that known or virtual certainty, the ball has been put into play, that ball is in play. So that means that when the ball is put in play, that means that as soon as that player drops the ball, that first ball is now lost. And the player has made a stroke at a substituted ball. So those are the 5 situations when the ball is deemed to be lost. Again, you'll often hear, or people will request, and there's a good story that kind of, I think it happened at Torrey Pines with Phil Mickelson, and Phil didn't want to go look for his ball, but a volunteer that was there went down to the beach and found it, or found a ball, and once a ball is found, it needs to be identified. It's the player's obligation to do that. However, if Phil would have hit a shot from that area or closer to the hole, then it wouldn't have mattered. So sometimes if you're playing in a match against someone else possibly, and you hit your first one way in the trees, and then you knock your next one an inch from the hole, if I was playing against you, I would run to the trees to find your ball. No, but if you had someone that you were playing against that might do that, you would want to go and putt that ball.
And you'd have to putt it before they found a ball out there that you had to go identify.
Right, but then I guess in match play you'd also have to make sure that you're not, that it's your turn too. So you have that kind of thing. So maybe it's,
although all you can do is recall it. It's not a penalty for hitting it. You can always play it.
Sure.
And all your opponent can do is have you recall the shot. Well, that's still the ball going to be in play.
So, okay, well let's just say that this happens. So I run up there, and I hit it in, and you recall it, but can't you still don't you?
No, that becomes your ball in play.
You've already
Your ball in play.
Becomes your ball in play. You played it further than where your ball may have been lost. So your opponent may recall your shot, but then you're going to tap it in again. So that's still.
Okay, so you can still do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. But yeah, so I guess I think we talked about this in a previous discussion, but a lot of times when we get with lost balls or provisional balls, we just want to make sure that the player wants us to go look for that ball, because a lot of times we don't. They'll be better off playing that provisional.
One of the things to clarify relative to officiating or refereeing is the search for 5 minutes and finding a ball. Let's say that the player's ball is, or the player is one place and his ball is someplace else, and so I found your ball. Well, the question is, Does the clock stop? Does the clock continue running? I mean, what would be the procedure relative to the search?
The time spent looking to identify that ball does not count in the 5 minutes. So say
The time keeps going though, so the clock doesn't stop when you go to look for a ball. It's still going. But if you find the ball before 5 minutes or at 5 minutes, you can identify it after the fact. But if I find the
No,
ball,
I understand that. But what if somebody says, "I found your ball,"
Mhm.
and you stop, and the player is somewhere else, and it takes a while for him to get there, he or she to get there to identify it. And what if it isn't their ball?
Right.
So my question is,
The clock keeps going. There's no start and stop. It just
But if it turns out to be his ball, and even if by the time he gets there, it's after 5 minutes, he still gets to play it
Yeah.
because it was found before
Right.
5 minutes was up.
right. I get that.
But let's say I think the question you're asking is, let's say it's 4 minutes and 30 seconds, and then someone says, I found my ball, and then you walk over there and it takes 45 seconds to get there, and then it's not your ball. At that point in time, it's been 5 minutes. Your ball's lost because the clock doesn't stop once you're going to identify a ball.
But the clock stops once you, the player, or your caddy starts looking. Correct?
Starts.
Right.
Yes.
So if my opponent's looking, the clock hasn't started yet.
Correct.
or a referee or a spectator.
Right,
anybody
anyone.
else.
Right.
Mhm.
But you do have to be careful as the referee. If you're out there spotting in the middle of the fairway and you know exactly where that ball went into that deep stuff, I always drove over near it and just stood and waited until they came, and then they'll say, "Did you see my ball?" And I said, "Would you like me to help you look for your ball, or would you like to?" And because it's, you just can't go in there traipsing around because he might not want you, or you might know that it's in a
Sure.
place that he doesn't want it to be. So.
Sure. Yeah.
But then I wouldn't have any way of replenishing my ball supply.
You can go after he.
You can go after he leaves.
Yeah.
When I got my orange ball return retriever in there.
Yeah, I'm like, that's a good practice to wait until you ask the player, do you want me to go look for this ball? And then a lot of times I'll explain to the player, if we find it, you have to play it,
I get the
or
what do
take
you
it
think?
unplayable.
Well, what do you think? I go, I really.
I don't think.
They don't know me very well.
Right.
Well, I mean, why wouldn't you help them look?
Well, no, they come
When they
up.
start.
No, why wouldn't you, as an official? I mean,
Okay,
from an official standpoint, I go look for it.
right away.
Yeah.
They may not want you to go.
Yeah,
What
they might not
difference does
want
it
to
make?
play. Because if you
Because
find
once you
it,
find it, he's got to play
you have
it.
to
But if it's
identify it.
unplayable, he's going to have the same penalty anyways.
Well, not necessarily, because what if his provisional is in the middle
If
of
he
the
gets a
field?
If he's in a provisional,
Right.
Yeah, the situation he talked about Nicholson, that was against Liplayer, and they both hit the ditch
Right.
way left,
Yep.
and then Nichols hit the ball right down the middle of the fairway, but they found his ball,
right.
and he had to go back to the tee and then another provisional ball.
Yeah. No, I get that.
Yeah.
Provisional is.
Yeah, no,
it's a
if
different.
it's if there's no provisional, yeah, definitely go
Then
in
they
there
tighten
and find
it.
it, because
Yeah, I can see
they
no
got
problem.
other things to do.
Do you have guys on? Usually the kids.
I think so, yeah.
Automatically reload, so.
Yeah, just one of these things.
Haven't hurt anybody.
Yeah.
Well, they're supposed to mute their side.
You guys can all hear us out there, correct? And see the screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, we can.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Nodding or something.
Yeah, they're not.
Needed one of them yesterday.
All right, so a stroke and distance here, we all know at any time a player can go and play under stroke and distance from where they previously played. That's a 1-stroke penalty. And except as otherwise provided in the rules, if a player makes a stroke at a ball from the spot at which the original ball was last played, he is deemed to proceed under the penalty of stroke and distance. So this is a general statement. So for example, we'll talk about a provisional ball where they are playing from that spot where they previously played, where that's not playing under stroke and distance. And so that provisional ball is a more specific situation that trumps this rule here, or this statement. And if a player's ball is out of bounds, they need to go back from where they last played from. We all know that. Hopefully. All right. So the ball is not found within 5 minutes. The ball is lost, as we discussed earlier. The one-stroke penalty, they need to go back and play as nearly as possible from the spot from which they last played. Now, the exception here is that if it is known or virtually certain that the original ball that has not been found has been moved by an outside agency, or is in an obstruction or an abnormal ground condition, or is in a water hazard, the player may proceed under that applicable rule. So in those situations, pretty much all of which we've talked about, except we haven't really talked about outside agency, but in those situations, they could proceed under the rule as long as they have that known or virtual certainty. All right. Provisional ball. So again, a provisional ball can be played for a ball that is lost outside of a water hazard or maybe out of bounds. So if there's just a water hazard, the player is not playing a provisional ball. They're playing under stroke distance in that case. Now, if there's a chance that it could be lost outside of the water hazard, there's a bunch of tall trees near a water hazard, or there's a tall hazard before or after the hazard, where there's a possibility that the ball could not be in the water hazard, then that player is allowed to play provisional. So this is something I know happens quite a bit at junior events, or players. I think it happens at all of our events, but a lot of times at junior events, where the players they think that they're hitting a provisional ball for a ball that goes towards water, but they're really not. And it's something that is, I guess, learned with making mistakes. I think most people learn it by making a mistake, but I know, Mike, I think you had this happen quite a bit at Fieldstone, right?
Yeah, Fieldstone number 11. Hit it left or hit it right, and they're told to automatically reload if they think their ball is lost or out of bounds, but they can't see the red stakes a lot, because they're all over the place there. And the young kids get up there, and you have to kind of ask them, why did you hit that ball? And is it provisional? If they say, well, it went in there, did you see the stakes? Yeah, I saw it.
Right.
That one poor kid hit 3 on that one, so he finally got to the provisional stakes. He was hitting 9 from there, so his dad didn't like it.
Well, so dad's fault for not reading the rules.
So here, when just the procedure for playing provisional, the player needs to announce to his opponent or a fellow competitor or marker in stroke play that he intends to play provisional, or that he intends to play under Rule 27-2. He can only say that for the next year. That won't be the case in 2019. But they need to go through that procedure. So in this decision here, which we'll show in a second, it kind of covers certain phrases that qualify as covering for someone playing provisional and certain phrases that don't. So we'll go over that shortly. And then the player needs to play the provisional ball before he or his partner goes forward to search for that first ball, for that original ball. And then there's another decision that we'll go over that talks about what it means to really go forward to search. And a couple examples of where the player can actually go forward and be okay and still play a provisional ball.
So next year, you don't have to announce you're hitting a provisional?
No, it's just a
No, it'll
number.
just be a different rule. Different rule number, sorry, yeah.
You gotta remember which number to call.
Right.
Go back to the old hitting provisional.
Okay, and then if a player doesn't follow this procedure, then they're going to be playing under stroke distance. All right, so let's go to the decisions really quick to kind of cover. So this talks about what's required for it being a provisional. So we can kind of skip the questions. Basically, just says what is the announcement really require in order for the player to play a provisional ball. It says that Rule 27-2 specifically provides that the player must announce to his opponent, marker, or fellow competitor that he intends to play a provisional ball. The player's statements must specifically mention the words provisional ball or must make it clear that he is proceeding under Rule 27-2A. Therefore, a player who says nothing has put another ball into play under stroke and distance. The following examples are statements that do not satisfy the requirement of announcing a provisional. That might be lost. I'm going to reload. That might be out of here. I better hit another one. I'll never find that one. I'll play another. And so those are statements that we all hear on the tee, but those aren't good enough in order for the player to play to actually hit a provisional. So
If they say that as an official, are you supposed to clarify them or anything like that, or just let them say that?
Clarify.
yeah,
Make them stay provisional.
Okay.
yeah. So
Now, can we prod them to say provisional?
Just tell them to.
Okay, okay, we do that.
Yeah.
You better say provisional.
I do it as a player.
Well-
If somebody in my group gets one,
Yeah,
row
right.
B,
Yeah.
and they say, I'm gonna hit another one, I'll ask them, are you playing a provisional ball? And they'll say, yes, this is a provisional ball.
Do they have to say this is a provisional ball? They say to say yes? Is that sufficient?
I would say no, because they have to say it.
Are you hitting a provisional ball and they
Are you
say
hitting-
It
yes?
says they must announce,
They
so
must
they have to
announce.
declare they're hitting a provision.
But I try to protect them too, I know it didn't happen in one of the senior events. To a player, he, at his own golf course.
No.
yeah, I mean, I think usually if I see someone going back to their bag and they don't say it, I'll just say you're playing a provisional ball, right? And that's, I mean, as long as you as the committee says that, that's fine. But if it's another player, the player doesn't just say it. So the committee member can say it, or the rules official can say it, and that will suffice.
Okay, but they gotta specifically say provisional ball.
Unless you as a rules official say, are you playing a provisional ball? And they say
He just
yes,
answers.
that's
That's
fine.
okay?
That's okay for an official.
Okay.
But I guess we could probably sit here and argue about it. I mean, I would be okay with it if the player said that and they said yes, I would say that that's fine. But that's just the way.
Somebody's got a
envision
smirk on
it.
his face over there.
See, instead of asking them, I would tell them, I would state to them, state that you're playing a provisional.
Okay.
Don't ask them. Announce it as a
And
provisional.
that's probably the better way because then they know they have to do it going forward.
Well, that's what the rule says. It says they have to specifically state, use the words. And then you're teaching them too.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm smirking because as a player, if somebody just said yes, and let's say it was the first hole, it's gonna be a long, cold
Oh, that's
17
right.
holes to play, and the guy didn't do it.
Yeah.
I think I would, as a player, I would allow that to happen. As an official, I would not. But as a player, I would call the guy, you didn't say provisional after you just told me yes. It's a little beyond the pale.
I agree.
It depends on if it's a match and you're trying to get under his
Well,
skin, right?
Depends if you like them or not.
Right, exactly. What was this revised from?
Oh, the statement D.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe that was a new one that they put in.
Yeah, it's probably new. I bet
Does
it's
it
new.
does it say underneath, or does it specifically say to D on
This is
the thing?
Yeah, just.
So yeah, so it is tied to D. So it must just be an added one that they put in, right?
Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah, I have my other book back in the office, but I don't know for sure. And then the other decision here that talks about what it means to go forward to search in the rule, where it says that. So a player will be considered to have gone forward to search when he has proceeded more than a short distance towards the place where the original ball is likely to be. As the purpose of Rule 27-2A is to save time, the player is permitted to go forward a short distance before determining that it would save time to return promptly to play a provisional ball. As a guideline, the player should be considered to have proceeded more than a short distance and therefore to have gone forward to search if he has proceeded more than approximately 50 yards. However, this guideline does not preclude a player from playing a provisional ball when he has proceeded more than a short distance or 50 yards for another specific purpose, such as to retrieve a ball or a different club to play that new provisional ball, or to confer or speak with a referee or a rules official. So in those cases, the player has the ability to go forward farther than that 50-yard guidelines that they have. But if it's not those cases, then that 50 yards is kind of the standard. All right, let's go back here really quick. One other thing that's So here is the note here, and then also the order of play. So the way that it should work for provisional, if someone's hitting provisional, they should wait for everyone else in the group to play first, and then hit provisional after. And if there's multiple people hitting provisionals, they should
Hit in the same order they hit in.
The same order they hit in. Exactly. Yeah. And then the last statement just says that if the player can hit as many provisionals as they need to, and each provisional ball maintains that relationship with the one prior to it. So we've all seen this, and it's awful on that first tee when you see someone pipe 3 or 4 of them, but they can keep hitting provisional balls until they get one to play.
Problem is they need to make sure that they're all marked individually so they know which one is where.
This is 1, this is number 2.
Yeah, because we had that happen in a junior event where the kid had a sleeve of balls from his high school, all marked the same way, hit the whole damn sleeve. And then we get out there and he can't decide which one was the first one because they're all 3 in the same general area.
So it's
So then
automatic in the last
you're going back, no,
or you got to go back to the
going back to the tee and he's hitting 7.
Well, could
Sounds
You
like
can't
bad
identify
officiating
it.
to me.
You can't identify which ball is which.
and they
Right.
and they were in radically different places, or they were in different places
Within
If they were-
25 yards.
Okay, so that's still. I mean, but in theory though, couldn't you just pick one and not just pick one?
Choosy. It's my first one. My first one.
Yeah. There's a decision in your office.
I think
You
it's.
want the one with the best slide. Is that what you're saying?
I think you. Okay. 27-11, page 435. So we need to see
Dash
here.
or slash?
Slash
Flashlight.
435. Okay, so a player entitled to play a provisional ball from the tee plays it into the same area as his original ball. The balls have identical markings, and the players cannot distinguish between them. The following are various situations and the solutions, which are based on equity. When the above circumstances exist and one or more of the balls are found within a search of 5 minutes. Okay, so
Okay, before you go in, let's see if there's a Kyle solution here.
right. I don't know. We'll see. Okay, so one ball is found in a water hazard and the other ball is not found. The ball that was found must be presumed to be a provisional ball. Okay. So both balls are found in the water hazard as the player's original ball is lost in the water hazard due to his inability to identify it. The player must proceed under Rule 26-1 with respect to the original ball and estimate that spot, et cetera, et cetera. Then his next stroke would be his third. One ball is found in bounds, the other ball is lost or out of bounds. The ball in bounds must be presumed to be the provisional ball. Both balls are found in bounds, whether in a playable or an unplayable lie, and one ball is in the water hazard and the other is not, or both balls lie through the green or in a bunker. One could argue that both balls are lost. However, it would be inequitable to require the player to return to the tee playing 5. When the player has found both balls but does not know which is the original, which is the provisional, accordingly, the player must select one of the balls, treat it as his provisional, and abandon the other. So I would
In
say
that case, he should have selected one of the 3, but now he's hitting 6 because he's lying 5.
Exactly. No, well, he said
Well, he hit 2 provisionals.
Yeah.
So he'd be hitting 6. He was lying
So
5.
if you find your ball, it's not the original, it's not the first provisional, it's got to be the third one automatically. If
You
can't-
just always assume the worst.
Has to be the last provisional.
So to hit that whole sleeve, he said he's hit 4 balls,
The worst is that
3
you
balls.
don't identify any of them, and you go back and hit 7.
Yeah,
That's the worst.
That's
This
the
is
worst
a hell of a
condition.
lot better than.
Yeah, this
what I
is
would-
actually giving him 2 strokes.
Yeah, so choose these all right.
You're more on top of this than I thought.
That was a good guess.
It wasn't a guess. I've read that before.
Probably about half an hour.
If you want to call it a guess, that's fine.
No.
But anyways, the problem is really when you have situations that are unequitable in terms of one out of bounds, I guess in this case, it does state too that both of the balls are either in the same condition. So if you had one that was in the bunker and one that was in the fairway, then I think that you would have to go back to the tee because it's not in the same area. Or at least this
But you can
the
select,
way that I
you
read
have
it.
to select the ball and provisional ball and one in the bunker, probably.
Well,
If you found both balls in play.
but you're making the assumption that the ball in the bunker is
The
the
provisional.
I think
is
you're
the worst
required to
lie.
be the worst lie, yeah.
Well, I mean,
Why they can go back and play another.
what if the ball in the bunker is a clearer shot to the hole or is an easier shot
Then what? The
than
ball in the fairway?
the one in the fairway? And that and you and I but seriously, you and I differ on what's easiest. I mean, I think in that case, because it says here specifically that it says that
Yeah, solution four.
both balls lie through the green or in a bunker.
Yeah. Solution four lets him choose.
So I think that they have to be both in the same condition, similar spots.
All it says, when both balls are found, it'd be inequitable to have them return to the tee.
Right. But then you get a choice.
So it says both balls are found in bounds, whether playable or unplayable lie in one
So it
ball.
says he can choose, the player can choose.
That's what it says.
That would be a dumbass.
So I guess, yeah, let them choose.
Well, one is
Treat it as provisional ball. So I guess yeah, one ball is in the water.
Well, if one's in the bunker and the other one's in the fairway, even if it's 10 yards shorter, I'm going to hit the one in the fairway.
It says, okay, so
You're not
so
gonna
both
try to hit a
balls are
long
found in
bunker shot.
bounds, whether in a playable and so it's
Yeah,
it's
so he could select the best shot that he's got, but it's if he's already hit two provisionals, it's the second one.
Right.
Provisional is the one he's playing, no matter which
Well,
one
he
of the
counts
two
it
he
as the
picks.
second one.
Counts as the
Right.
second
Hit it in
one,
the
yeah.
bunker and the fairway.
So he's
Why
hit-
would you hit the second provisional?
Yeah.
Because you know it's not.
You don't know that you hit in the bunker or the fairway. It's over a rise. You can't see.
Or you hit
Right.
a
Yeah,
tree or
you're right,
something
but
like
it does
that.
say
No, that's
if
true.
they're lying in different conditions, one being in a hazard and one being in the fairway.
Right.
The player still gets to choose.
He still gets to select. But it's being played as the provisional, so he's hitting
right.
four.
Right.
Okay. Okay. So that makes sense. So then the player always chooses, but they're getting that penalty. Worst case, they're
I'm sorry?
He's hitting four.
Yeah,
if they have two.
it's so he'd be laying 3 on the provisional ball, right?
Okay,
Yeah,
that
but
makes
if you
sense.
found both of them, you should be able to hit.
It says, it doesn't matter. It's saying that you have to declare it as the provisional ball. So you'd be hitting 4. Right.
Correct.
Like,
So in theory, why would you
straight.
hit the second provisional until you went up and searched for the first one?
well, because it's more than 50 yards away.
Because you're supposed to have provision.
You can't go up there.
You can save time.
Here we go again, right?
You don't want to get a 2-stroke penalty from Mike Church on the 18th hole.
See, it's like, it'd be like playing 13 at Eagle Eye, right? Where you hit, where it hits left and it rolls over by the cart path, it rolls down toward the woods you can't see. So you decide to hit a provisional. You go up there and
They're both right.
they're both in play. And if you didn't mark it,
You didn't mark it, you don't know which one. So
exactly.
penalized for that.
As an official, if you're on the tee, can you ask the player if it's a different ball? Or suggest he has a different ball?
Yeah.
We suggest,
I would do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
with the juniors especially, I suggest they mark because they tend to, well, they tend to use a whole sleeve of the same ball. So their high schools will give them the ball. And so I tend to tell them, put a P on the ball for provisional. You know, if it's the same number coming out of that sleeve and you have no way of knowing where the first one went, you could hit the second one right alongside of it and not know.
To me, that makes the sense is that's where you should get the penalty is for not hitting a different ball. So then
Oh.
you avoid that
Dumbass.
situation.
Dumbass.
Yeah, that's, I mean, you know, whatever, I always play balls with a special mark on them, but if I have to hit a provisional, it's a different number I could get, and I tell them, I'm playing a 2 for this second.
You don't even require that they mark their ball. I mean, they can play unmarked balls if they want to, there's no requirement to mark their ball.
Right. Suggestion.
It's kind of like being dumb, I guess, you know?
Well, there is, but you pay for it later.
But if both guys are hitting the same ball and they're side by side out there in the fairway, they don't know which one is theirs.
It's a lost ball.
Then they're so lost, they gotta go back to the tee, hit another one.
Yep.
and it's not a provisional at that point.
Right.
I know that's what Mick would make them do. I've seen it.
Yeah.
We don't do that for junior tournaments, though. We have a little coaching for juniors. Some of our younger junior tournaments, you know.
Oh, yeah, the
Some of our
14 and
junior-
under.
14 and under kids, and we tend to, you know, have a little leeway with the younger ones. So we're not real strict on some of those kinds of rule enforcements.
It's more of a teaching, right?
Yeah.
How would you do it then, Craig? Would you?
Have them pick.
Mm.
You have 14-year-old kids and they're both teed off and they're playing the same ball and they're right next to each other. Hey, will you guys decide which one you want to play? And smart enough, you know, mark your ball left.
I don't like that.
Mm.
I would maybe the way you should do it is no, but just say that's yours and that's yours, and you say it, and then tell them after. I wouldn't say the
Give them
players,
the
"Oh, no,
option."
you pick. Just say. I mean, that's. I guess that's the way I would handle it. It's like,
You're breaking the rules.
Well,
What difference does
don't-
it make?
Isn't it the starter's job to make sure they declare their balls right there on the first tee, so they're not
Oh, yeah.
playing the first?
Right.
That's what you try to do.
Sure.
But I've experienced where a lot of players will say, I'm hitting a provisional, this is a Titleist 4. And he'll say what the other one was.
Mm-hmm.
Or we'll ask him.
Right.
You know, some of them keep sleeves of balls with 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they do that by marking the same ball, but they pick out number 2 ball when they hit it the first time they hit the provisional. That's now you know the difference between the two.
I think it's after I calm down. Like, what ball did I just-
Yeah, I know.
Whichever one's.
What ball did you find?
That's it. You got it.
Found a ball over here.
That's the ball you're looking for. You know, this person said, well, when you hit the one ball, that's fine.
It's not a problem as long as they're not yellow and orange and white.
Right.
If you're all white, then you have an
Doesn't
issue.
care whether you hit the Titleist 1 or
All right.
Titleist 2
So
or Titleist 3. But does that
a provisional ball here, we talked about that when the provisional ball becomes in play. The provisional ball becomes in play once you play it from a place where the original ball is likely to be, or from a spot near the hole within that place. So you can actually hit a ball from behind where that original ball is, and it can travel beyond that, but you can't play a shot from a ball that's at rest beyond where that original ball might be. At that point in time, the first ball is lost and the provisional ball is in play. So that allows people, if they hit a bad provisional shot, top it off the tee, they can hit it again and not have to go up and look and then come back and play that. Okay, and then if the original ball is lost outside of a water hazard or is out of bounds, the provisional ball becomes in play. We talked about that. And then here's where we get into our choosies. So what another choosy, but so the exception here, if it's known or virtually certain that the original ball that has not been found has been moved by an outside agency or is in an obstruction or an abnormal ground condition, the player may proceed under this applicable rule. So in this case, the player has the choice to either play under the rule or play the provisional ball. It's either or up to the player. Whereas all the other situations with the provisional ball, the player either has to play the provisional ball or the original ball. So this one, the player has the choice. So I know for me personally, I didn't really understand this until like last year, because I always thought that if you find if you have virtual certainty, you can't go play the provisional. You have to proceed under these one thing. But in this case, that player, if they were to hit it in a big thing of ground under repair, they could still choose to play the provisional if they wanted to. Provided that the ball hasn't been found. If the ball's been found, then that's different.
And there's no penalty?
There would be, so if the player plays that provisional ball, there would be a penalty. So they would, it would be their penalty, like I guess under stroke and distance, right?
Yeah.
So if their first one went into the big ground under repair, and they hit the provisional down the middle of the fairway, they did find it in the ground under repair, they could either take relief from ground under repair, drop and hit 2, or they could hit the provisional hitting 4.
So unless it's a par 3 and it went in the hole, this is never going to happen.
Well, no, I mean, not necessarily. I mean, let's say that you hit the ball in in a drainage ditch in the middle of like some tall heather, and we have virtual certainty that the ball's in there, but we can't find it. And then if you were to take relief from that, you'd be dropping it in heather, and you got to carry it 40 or 50 yards to get back to the fairway, and your provisional ball is right in the middle of the fairway. In that case, the player may want to play the provisional instead of having to deal with that heather. It's very unlikely, Tony, for sure. But the player does have that option in these three cases here.
Yeah, because even in that case, I mean, he could declare it an unplayable lie and take relief after that.
Sure.
But he'd have to go back and get it.
he'd have to go back.
Well, no, because you take your drop and then you could take an unplayable from that one. So you could take 2 club lengths, so you go
Right.
back in the line there.
You know.
But at that point, I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, there's definitely ways, but it probably will never happen out there. I'm sure it has at some point in time. Probably on a par 3, like you said, where that's a more realistic option there.
27/10 covers what we were talking about a few minutes ago about 2 players hitting the same type ball, same number off the tee, then it's close together. They can't tell which one is which. Here it says that they're both lost. You go back.
Right. Yep. Yeah. So it's that's a little bit different than what we were talking about for because the
We're talking about the
provisional
same player.
is the same player. This one is 2. This 27-10 or /10 is 2 separate players, and they can't determine whose ball is who. So they have to assume the worst and go back and play.
There's a provision in your book that isn't up to you, unless you're a GAM junior player. and Craig Reading is the official in charge. That's the revision.
You're gonna tell those 12-year-old kids out there, right?
Oh, I'm with you.
I'll be crying in a second.
It reminds me of a nice teaching moment on why you should be marking your balls, and they'll never forget it. Tell them, hey,
Until the next time.
could make you go back and hit the lost ball.
I've noticed how appreciative those juniors and their parents are.
Yes. All right, so the provisional ball should be abandoned if the original ball is neither lost or out of bounds, and the ball is found. The player needs to abandon the provisional ball and continue with the original. Or if we have normal virtual certainty that the ball is in a water hazard, the player may proceed in accordance with the water hazard. In either situation, if the player makes any further strokes at the provisional ball, he has played a wrong ball, and the provisions of Rule 15-3 apply. So if once a ball is found, the player needs to proceed with that ball. So in Phil Mickelson's case, once that volunteer found that ball, he has to either go down there, play it, or take an unplayable, which in his case, I think he had to go back to the tee, and he didn't hit as good of a second or
His next
third drive.
next shot was not as good as that
Right.
provisional was.
Right.
Matter of fact, I think it went down about where the original ball was too.
All right, and here's some key decisions for 27. That 27-2C/1.5, that's on that one kind of covers those choosies, or that choosy option that we talked about, and that's on page 449. All right, any questions?
I didn't know that. I just noticed the 27/1. Both players hit into an abnormal condition, and A's caddy's walking forward toward the area where A struck his ball. A instructs his caddy not to look for the ball, but instead to go help search for B's ball, because the search doesn't start until A or his caddy gets to the area where the ball is lost. So we'll look for B's ball first, and that way we get more time. If he can't find his, I'll decide whether or not I'm going to go hit another one.
And what does it say?
He can do that.
Really?
Do that.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
the search for ace ball doesn't start as long as they're looking for deuce ball.
The exception to that might be if both balls are in the very same proximity.
area, yeah.
If they're looking in an area for one ball and the other ball's in that same area, that's
I would think.
you can't say I'm only looking for beach ball at this point.
Right. I would think if you're in the same general area, but here it's very express. It says one hits a long drive into heavy rough and one hits a short drive into heavy rough.
Right.
It says don't go looking for my ball. Just go look at his ball.
The other decision that I haven't done a very good job of applying is 27-2A/2.2. So getting a provisional ball if you think it might be in the water.
What page?
443.
So which one is it?
Two-
Which one on that one?
2.2.
or 5?
2.2.
2.2.
442.
So possibility that the original ball is in water hazard may not preclude play of provisional ball. So is it true that if a player's original ball may have come to rest in a water hazard, the player is precluded from playing a provisional ball? No. Even though the original ball may be in a water hazard, the player is entitled to play a provisional ball if the original ball might also be lost outside the water hazard or out of bounds. In such a case, if the original ball is found in the water hazard, the provisional ball must be abandoned.
If he hits a provisional ball in a water hazard, there can't be virtual certainty, right?
Right.
So if he finds his original ball in the water hazard, he can't pick up the provisional ball. He's played that, right?
So run that by us.
Okay. You're not sure what in the water hazard. So there's no virtual, there's no knowledge and no virtual certainty. If I had a provisional ball, I'm telling everybody I don't know where the ball went. So I can't. If I find the ball in the water hazard, I can't play under the water hazard rule.
Well,
Because I've already
That's
said
what this says you do.
It just
You
depends.
can because you found it.
Yeah,
Can
it just
because you found
depends.
the ball.
So if there's just all water hazard down the entire left side of the hole, there's no trees, tall grass, or anything like that, and you hit it in there, and then you say I'm going to hit a provisional ball. That's not a provisional ball because your ball is definitely in the water hazard. Okay, but let's say that there's tall trees or tall grass around the hazard, and your ball may not be in the hazard. You can hit a provisional ball, but and as Tony said, when you find it, you have virtual certainty. So when you find the ball in the water hazard, there's virtual certainty, and then you can take relief under the water hazard rule. In that case,
But should you,
And abandon
if I
the
was a
provisional.
competitor, I would make sure I made an announcement to the other competitors of why I'm hitting that provision. I am hitting that because I think it might be out of bounds or it might be lost. Wouldn't that be the smart thing to do?
Outside-
Outside of the
Yeah.
hazard.
Outside of the
Outside
hazard.
hazard.
sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Because,
But
as you say,
but let's that's definitely the recommended way to do it. But let's say we have a player that says I'm going to hit a provisional ball and they don't say it. If there's those physical features there that would make it possible, then I would say that the player is okay to hit a provisional ball in that case. He doesn't need to say, or she doesn't need to say, I'm hitting a provisional ball because I think it's a loss outside of the water hazard. If the physical conditions are met, then I think if the player is okay in just saying I'm going to hit a provisional ball. But it's definitely
but as an
recommended.
official, when I'm out there in the middle, shall I ask them why they hit the provision?
Sure.
That's always
I do all the
a good
time.
thing to do.
Sure.
What was your thinking and why you did it?
Right.
Let's see what they say.
95% are virtually certain. All of them say it's in the hazard. I thought it was in the hazard. I
Well,
go,
Then you say, well,
If it's in a hazard, then it's not a provisional ball.
I know.
Right.
So don't say that.
You told me that on khaki on number 5, where all down either side it was lateral hazard. And I said, they're coming down here, they haven't played. And he said, ask them, why did they play a provisional?
they don't know the course sometimes. They don't see the red stakes. They're not sure it's lateral up there. We get that a lot of times. I didn't know it was lateral hazard.
Still, they're okay.
Yeah.
Okay, they're fine.
It's on the hard card.
But if you can see it.
Yeah, they don't, if the player tells me,
If it,
I didn't know it was a lateral hazard, I'm gonna give them that leeway and let them, take relief from the water hazard.
Unless it's just like lake.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Ford
no.
Lake, and you're like,
Yeah,
oh,
but
that's
that
hazard.
khaki was like woods,
Right.
but right inside was
Yeah.
creeks
It could be
or
right.
wet areas. So, but it was all marked red.
Right.
So
You may not
I had
see
no
stakes,
clue.
exactly. There might only be a line.
They only go
right
so
on
far,
the
they may
ground
not,
that you don't
they may not
see.
go
Yep.
right, it was all the way.
Red stakes extend. I mean, that's a fieldstone. You have those red stakes that extend up to the point. I remember, whatever it is now, 15 or 16, 15 or 16.
Oh,
And then they
yeah.
stop for a while, then they, you know. So, you know, how they know all these things, it's hard to say.
Right.
Well, the point of this is I used to preclude them from hitting a provisional, saying, no, that ball's in play. If you, and this says it's not the right procedure.
Well, if they think they would have lost, would have been a loss ball outside of the hazard.
Do you give them the signal in the middle of the fairway? Then
Because if you don't find the ball in the water hazard, then it is a walk ball, right? And then they have to go back to the tee, right?
Or unless there's virtual
You can
certainty.
stop, well, sure.
I
Okay.
do sometimes. Yeah.
Well, but this says they should hit a provisional, which is then they can play the provisional.
Right.
Half the time you give them the
It's
signal, I don't
lost.
know what the
You
signal
didn't
is.
know that it went in the water hazard.
So Mike brought up a good point. If you're out there on a trouble hole and someone goes down to hit a second ball, I'll usually run out in the middle of the fairway and just wave my hands and say, stop, don't hit it.
Yeah.
I think that's, I mean, you know, sometimes they
Yeah,
they
anyway.
get it, but you know, if we try to signal them safe or whatever, you know, they don't know what that means.
Yeah.
I know some,
So-
half of them don't know. what
So
the signal
yeah, I
is.
mean, in your case, Mike, I would recommend going out in the
Does this
fairway,
mean it's
taking your card out there even if you have to, so that they don't.
Then
I only go so far. I don't take
Right.
that out there anymore. I used to do that.
yeah, you with your voters.
Put your hard hat on so you don't get hit when the ball's flying.
All right, rule 26 here, water hazards, including lateral water hazards. So relief for a ball. So if a ball, so again here, we talked about this many times before, so we won't go over it in detail. But there is a decision that talks about that known or virtual certainty or principle. And so we have to have known or virtual certainty that the ball is in the water hazard in order to take relief from it. If we don't have known or virtual certainty, if there's you know, a greater than 5% chance that the ball could be somewhere else, then you know, we need to go back and play under stroke distance. And that's what decision 26-1/1 says. Now, if we do have if we are known or virtually certain that the ball is in the water hazard, we can take relief under the rules here. So we've got in a yellow water hazard, we have 2 relief options, and then for a red one, we have 4. We always have the option from water hazard to play it without penalty, can ground or club, whatever. But under penalty of stroke, we can either go from when we last played from, so that's just A option here, proceed under stroke and distance. Drop a ball behind the water hazard, keeping the point at which the original ball last crossed the margin of the water hazard, directly between the hole and the spot on which the ball is dropped, with no limit to how far behind the water hazard the ball may be dropped. So the key word in this is that where it last crossed the margin of the water hazard. So it's not where it first crossed, it's where it last crossed. So a lot of times you may have, especially with yellow water hazards, player hit the ball on the greens and suck it back in. And a lot of times they'll use that reference point where they first crossed and not where they last crossed. And so it seems like every year at the Masters on 13 or 15, that comes into play in some fashion where the player, if they're not going to use the drop zone, they tend to go to the wrong place first. And I'm sure they've got rules officials on both those holes to get them to, you know, in the right place.
They do, but they're sitting at the green. They're not allowed to be out on the course.
Yeah.
Yeah. The official, like the official on 15, his chair's up against the stands on 16
Okay.
on the left-hand side of that pond where Woods hit. So the official was sitting right over there.
Right. And then
I got a question on this lateral water hazard. You know, you could choose the opposite margin of the hazard. It used to say in here that when you went to the opposite margin of the hazard to establish your point, you only had a 2 club length option from that point.
Right.
I don't see that in here now. What happened to it?
No, it's still
It says that.
It's so here we're saying so C as additional options only
2
if
club lengths.
if the ball is available, or if only available if the ball last crossed the margin of a lateral water hazard. Drop a ball outside the water hazard within 2 club lengths of and not near the hole then. And then it talks about these 2 points: the point where the original ball last crossed, or a point on the opposite margin of the water hazard, equidistant from the hole.
Equal distance, right?
Yeah.
Is that changing?
Yes.
It is.
Yeah.
Yes.
To what that statement covers
Oh.
these?
So
They're eliminating that.
they're
The
eliminating
opposite side.
The opposite
yep,
side of the
but-
margin.
but the committee is gonna be allowed to put a local rule in to allow it. So basically, they're just saying this happens at 1 out of every 50 golf courses, and we're gonna switch it so that it doesn't confuse people, but then the courses that it does apply to, they can put it in play if they want to.
Committee.
Right.
Okay.
And one of the things I've been doing with people too, and myself, because we have one at our place at Western, is the point where it entered, kind of take a shot with my rangefinder. I got 235 yards, go to the other opposite side, kind of measure out 235. That's the equal distance.
Right.
So with those now, it's been kind of easier to do things like that. Where before we had them, it's kind of an estimate.
Yeah, you're just kind of
Where's
guessing.
the arc?
Right.
What is the?
Right. Yeah. No, that's definitely good practice there.
Yeah.
Do that. All right, so yeah, Jeff, we still have it's still 2 club lengths, and
I just thought it was written in the .3 down here underneath C or something like that,
Yeah.
or in part of two. With it now, it's something that up in
something
C
that
itself.
C, yeah, right. And so actually, this happened that exact thing happened to JB Holmes, and probably I think someone else said it happened at a Solheim Cup or something like that.
Solheim
Right?
Cup, yeah,
Yeah.
call it Creamer.
Right. And so yeah, the JB Holmes and the Solheim Cup, the player took their line back option from the opposite side of the margin, whereas they only get that 2 club lengths. All right, and here's a picture of kind of all of our options for a lateral water hazard here, and then for the water, a regular water hazard. If this was yellow, we just wouldn't have those shaded areas around where we last crossed. We wouldn't have those 2 club length options. But this is a lateral water hazard, so we do have all 4 options at our disposal.
Kyle, what is point F?
Point F. Let me go to the decision. I think that's line of flight that people think that they get, but let me just make sure.
I hope so. Yeah, that's what it says.
Is that what it says? Yeah, so point F is what people refer to as line of flight that is not a relief option.
425.
Perfect.
Yes, it states that.
All right, so 26-2 talks about when a player hits the ball into a water hazard and then plays another shot and it stays within that water hazard, or it goes to another water hazard. So player's ball comes to rest in the same or another water hazard. If a ball played from within a water hazard comes to rest in the same or another water hazard after the stroke, the player may, under penalty of 1 stroke, play a ball as nearly as possible at the spot from which the last stroke from outside of a water hazard was made. So this is kind of get into our regression talk where we're kind of regressing back to that last spot where we played outside of the hazard. The player can proceed under the lateral or a water hazard options, or if it's a lateral water hazard under those options, incurring a penalty of 1 stroke under that rule. And then the reference point is where that original ball last crossed the margin of the hazard. So if this player was in a lateral water hazard, they could, after hitting it and staying within the same water hazard or another water hazard, they could take 2 club lengths from that original reference point and drop there just with a penalty of 1 stroke.
If they're in a different water hazard, though, they have to use the margin for the hazard which the ball is in, where it lies now.
I don't think so.
Yeah. I mean, you hit on one hazard and it goes into a different hazard. That's what it says.
You got to use the second hazard.
Second hazard. Right.
Yes.
Well, then why does it say here I'm just
Under regression, I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
So you see 26.2?
It says here, so 26, let me just get that exact. I may have just wrote it down wrong or whatever, but.
No, you're making stuff up.
I think it's the end of
Another
the
shitty-
II where it says
Confuses.
ball last crossed the margin of the hazard in which it lies. Which, not from where you hit it, but where it currently exists.
Where's the line? Okay, right, correct. Okay. So in that case, so you can always go back. So 26-1A is just going back to where you last played from. But if you're taking the other two options, either a line back or the 2 club lengths, you would take it from the hazard that your ball is now in. Correct?
Correct.
But if you hit the ball out of the hazard and it stays in the hazard, you can take it all the way back from where you hit the original shot before it went in the water.
Correct. Mhm.
Right, so that stroke counts.
Where you hit it,
You're 1
yes.
in, you're 2
2
in.
in,
Now you're hitting
3.
3 out.
3 out.
3 out,
Now you're
hitting
hitting
4.
4.
Okay. All right, so then this note here, if the player proceeds under Rule 26-1A by dropping a ball in the hazard as near as possible to the spot from which the original ball was last played, but elects not to play the drop ball, he may then proceed under Clause 1 and take another penalty stroke to go back to that either the place where he last played outside of the water hazard or to take his relief options from that point. So in this case, the player could do that and only incur 1 penalty, but since they dropped the ball, they lose that right, and then now they have to
That's
if
the
they want to get out
play,
of
and
it.
you're picking it up.
Right. And so in that case, it's probably not a great idea for the player to
Why would
drop the ball there.
Why would you drop back in a hazard? Maybe it's shallow water, and you thought if you dropped, you could play it, and when you dropped, it hit in the muck, and it's too deep, and you can't.
Right.
You know, I don't know. There's
Sure, or maybe you were let's say it was a 250-yard 3-wood that you hit, and it was just on the edge of the hazard, and you crossed way back there 250 yards away, and so you hit it and it stays in the hazard. You may want to just try to drop it because you got a 15-yard pitch shot to the green as opposed to going all the way back and hitting 250 yards again. I think that would be a situation.
And if you hit your next shot over the green out of bounds,
Experience.
you're allowed to, will come all the way back to the original spot where it first crossed the mark. Right?
Correct. Yeah. So
Or you're going up there. I'm
this is
sorry.
your question. Oh, so if the ball is lost or unplayable outside of the hazard or out of bounds, the player again has the option to go back to where they last played from, but then they can also, as you can see here, add an additional penalty stroke and go back to that reference point where they last played outside of the hazard, or taking relief under the hazard rules. So either if it's lateral water hazard, they have those 2 club length options. If not, that they go back in the line. But in this case, the player is taking the 1 stroke for the hazard, and then the 1 stroke for the unplayable or the ball being lost or whatever the case. And in this case, the player, if the player, I believe in this case, if the player drops it,
It's like a free drop.
it's like a free look, essentially,
Yeah, free
right?
look, yeah.
So if they drop it back, so let's say in Mike's case, the ball's in the hazard by the green, they stall it over into someone's porch, so it's out of bounds. In that case, that player could drop the ball back in the hazard. If they like the lie, they can play it. If they don't like it, they can take relief, but it's still only costing them 1 stroke.
really.
Whereas in the other case, if the ball is still in the hazard, and then they pick it up and they drop it back, if they want to come out of the hazard, they have to take another penalty stroke.
Kyle, so I'm a little confused. So if they drop it in the hazard, they've got stroke and distance penalty. If they take either of the other ones, they've got 2 strokes and distance of some sort also.
It looks like 2-stroke penalty. It's
So
Only if it goes out of bounds are you given that free look at a drop.
right. So basically, yeah, you know, the player can definitely go back to where they last played, and they're only going to get that 1 penalty. But then if they take further relief from the hazard, they're going to get 1 more penalty. So I think, Tony, what you're saying is correct. Is that
where is that?
because,
No, 26
so let's so
look at
so there's actually
26-2/1.
a picture that we'll just pull up here so that we can look at this. Is it this one or is it the other one?
It's this one, player B.
Yeah, it's this one. So in this picture, let's say that player B, it looks like player B hits it to point Y, which is out of bounds. So the player under the out of bounds rule has to go back to where they last played from, right? So that's going to be a 1-stroke penalty. So in that case, they can drop at point B and take the 1-stroke penalty and play it, or they can drop at point B, decide that they don't want to play it, take 1 more penalty to get out of the water hazard, or they can forget dropping at all and drop outside the water hazard, but that's going to cost them 2 strokes. One for the ball being out of bounds, and the other one for the water hazard. So in this case, where the ball is out of bounds, they're getting that free look when they drop the ball. But then in the other case, it's different. So if we go to point A, the player hits it to A, hits it to point X, it's within that same hazard. So in that case, if they want to proceed under lateral water hazard, they can either, with 1-stroke penalty, go back to where their original reference point was and take, sorry, this is a water hazard. So they can go back to their original reference point, which is that E there, and go back in a line with the flag and drop with the 1-stroke penalty. Or they can go back to the teeing ground here and play with the 1-stroke penalty. So if they drop again at point A, they're going to get a 1-stroke penalty for going back and playing from where they last were. And then if they want to, after dropping, they say, I can't hit this. If they want to get out of the hazard, they have to take another penalty stroke. So Joe had a good comment here. He said that this happens fairly frequently at the Meadows in the fall for I'm guessing for the state finals. I'm sure I know from my own personal experience playing that golf course that I could see that happening quite a bit too. So definitely happens. Does that make sense to everyone? It's a little confusing, but if we think of it that way, and the reason that the player gets that free look is because they're required by rule to go back and drop where they last played from because it's out of bounds. Whereas the other one with the hazard, they're just taking one option. One of their options is to go back to where they last played from, and then if they want to do something else, they can't do that without getting a penalty.
Right.
Still
Right.
confused?
Yeah.
I always thought it was just 1 stroke. I thought if you hit it in the hazard and then you played it from the hazard and you stayed in the hazard and then you elected to come out of the hazard, I thought it was just stroke and distance.
It is. It's just 1 stroke.
But you got the stroke for the one you played in the hazard.
Right.
So you hit in 1, hit it 2,
Right.
you pulled it out, it's 3. And
So
you're,
stroke and, okay.
you're hitting 4.
Well, so in this case, okay, the player is at point A, puts it to point X.
Right.
If they go and drop it on point E, it's just a 1-stroke penalty.
One
Right.
in the hazard.
Or
2 to point X.
Yeah.
Yep.
3 out.
Right,
hitting 4.
hitting 4.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
The way it was,
The only time that they'll get 2 is if they hit it to point X. Well, no, if they hit the point X and they decide I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna use one of my options to go back where I last played from, and they actually drop the ball at A, and then they see it and they're like, "Crap,
Nope.
I can't hit
And then
this." And then it takes another penalty stroke to get them out.
right, because they dropped the ball, and the ball's in play.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
You're not applying regression, and the only way regression works is if you don't hit it
right.
from point X and go back to the point of entry for shot A.
Right.
As much as you can, don't grab until you're absolutely sure.
Yeah, always.
You don't hit it if you can't get it out.
I'm sweating just in here.
I'm just surprised about the free look on the ball out of bounds.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah,
I'm
that's,
not sure why that's, but I mean, I guess it makes sense because the rule requires you to play from where
Where you last struck the
yeah.
ball. Yeah.
So whereas the water hazards, that's just one of two options or one of four options for the lateral.
Be real careful when you wade in the water, you get yourself in trouble.
Yeah.
That makes sense now.
Don't hit
Yeah, it
balls.
is. Yeah.
Really kind of. Just sit there talking about like I went in and I got in there again.
All that
I didn't see it. Now I understand it.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, this if people aren't don't quite get this, I would definitely recommend reading through this decision here, 26-2/1. And once you read it through a couple times and kind of see how everything is laid out, it becomes clearer. Hopefully. Clearer
Is mud.
clearer than before. Everything's relative. All right, and that's just the rest of the decision. And here's a few other decisions here.
You're gonna post this on YouTube again, right? So we don't have to sit there and try to scribble on.
we don't have to.
It'd be less if I did that, right?
Or we could make a copy, then give us all.
Well, it's there on YouTube. That's
Yeah, you have to wait until Tuesday, but it's late.
But you don't have a tournament for 2 months, so
Try
you
to
can't
find it on
plenty of time
YouTube, you
to
have to
read.
watch the whole thing.
Cash flow next year, start all over.
Right, exactly.
Oh, no.
Put it in that short-term memory.
Oh,
Yeah. Right?
Yeah, believe me.
It is, and it's gone already.
All right. So any questions on 26?
There is one.
Wading in the water.
All right, ball unplayable. So here for this one, we don't. Hopefully, we won't spend too much time on it. But a player can deem a ball unplayable anywhere on a golf course except for a water hazard. So if the ball is in the water hazard, the player needs to take relief under the water hazard rule. And the player themselves, they're the sole judge as to whether the ball is unplayable. So whether we think it's unplayable or not, it really is the player that determines if the ball is unplayable. So a player could take an unplayable for a ball in the middle of the fairway if they thought it was unplayable. And when we take an unplayable, it's a 1-stroke penalty. And we've got our 3 options. We can go back to where we last played from. We can take the ball where the ball is and the flag and go back on that line as far back as we need to. There's one exception to that we'll talk about in a second. Or we can go drop a ball within 2 club lengths of where that ball is, but not near the hole. So a lot of times it's something that players will get confused as they mix up the unplayable rule with nearest point of relief. So it's not nearest point of relief, it's from where that ball is. So a lot of times the player may grab the ball in the middle of the bush. It's probably always a good idea to either put a tee or something like that to have that reference point so we know when they're going back in the line or taking 2 club lengths, we know where that ball was to start.
And what happens if they take the 2 club lengths, because they can't go back further because there's woods, and they take the 2 club lengths and they're still in the bush? Is that a lost ball then? What happens then? Okay, I hit my second shot to the green, but I don't hit the green, and I slice it in the bush. I go to the bush. I can't go back further because there's more bushes back there for as far as I can see. And if I take 2 club lengths to the right or 2 club lengths to the left, I'm still in the bush, and I still don't have a swing.
So take a second unplayable.
Ball's not lost because you found the ball.
So you just take,
Ball's in
so I
place.
go 4 club lengths in it and take
Sure,
2 club lengths? Okay.
Exactly.
You're back and play from the previous stroke.
Yeah, we're back.
Club
Yeah,
length
you go back to where you last played.
He took 2 unplayables. That's why he said.
I can do that?
Sure you
Yeah,
can.
you
Put
can
your
take-
ball in
yeah.
the other
Well, you
play.
move to 2 club lengths, it says it's still unplayable. You move to 4 more club lengths from that.
Technically, you need to do it step by step.
Yeah, but-
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't just arbitrarily take
Right.
4.
Right.
Jim Thornton did that on number 2 at Indianwood.
Okay.
When he hit a ball right into the crap there along the roadway.
Yep.
Took an unplayable, 2 club lengths didn't get him out, 4 club lengths did, so he's line 3. We didn't want to go back to tee because the winds were heavy. He hit it on the green close to the stick, made the putt for 5 and walked away. That was the end of it. He was afraid of going back to the tee and hitting the ball over that junk and out of bounds, right? He's hitting 3, puts it out of bounds. He's got to go back to tee and reload. Be hitting whatever, but yeah.
Isn't that also John Allen's line? Is that the nicest point of your neatest?
It's the nearest point, not the nicest point, yeah.
But
True.
if you hit it in the bush, mark, take your 2 club lengths, get ready to drop it and say, this is not going to do me any good. If you don't drop that ball, you can elect to go back to the last point.
Right.
Once you drop the ball,
It's
it's back in play, right?
Right.
So you go, oh, whatever that word you use over there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you have not struck the ball yet, you can go back to the tee. That's what you want to do. Or
Struck or
from,
drop.
it can't have been dropped from your hand. Once it drops from your hand, the ball's in play.
Right, then you're not allowed to change relief options. But if you don't, correct me if I'm wrong, Craig, but if I dropped it incorrectly and not dropped it incorrectly, but if I dropped it and never struck the ground, or never first struck the ground in a proper place, I could change my relief options.
If you've dropped the ball according to a rule, you can't change your relief options.
Right.
If you haven't dropped it properly according to a rule,
You can
then
change.
you've got the 8 racer rule available
Right.
to you, which means then you can change your relief options.
So if I took 3 club lengths and dropped it and it hit within my last club length, then I could say, oh, I'm going to go back to the tee now.
Or if you dropped it and it's stuck in the bush.
Because that still satisfies the rule.
You dropped it under a rule.
Yeah.
When it's,
It hasn't touched the ground.
But
it left your hand in the bush is part of the course.
Yeah, there's a decision there that talks about that. What does it mean first strikes the course? And it's not necessarily the ground, it's anything on the
A
course.
part of the course. It says first strikes a part of the course.
Part of the course.
So as an official, you want to help your player out to make sure they understand what the options are, what the penalties are. Right. Be the appropriate thing to
A
do.
lot of them don't know that. Line of play. You line up.
Oh.
A lot of them, you're right, a lot of people are not aware that on a play line path, for an unplayable, there may be some spots over the hill on the other side where it's like mowed lawn or something, or on top of a hill sometimes. There's over
At khaki on number 16. When I was up. The guy.
Roser?
Rover.
Well, tell them other options. Tell them, hey, there's
Told him the option. He
tell
was
them,
back
if you
200
go back
yards,
here,
that's what he took.
you can find a spot where you can drop the ball and play it. It's a lot better than, lose that call to the team, maybe.
I wouldn't say those words. Is that what he's telling?
No, I just say it. I know. I didn't use those words.
Yeah, right, okay.
I said, if you look at your flag line, if you drop on the flag line, anywhere on that flag line, you're entitled to drop on that flag.
Right, okay.
A question, I thought you'd say something about 4 club lengths. You're saying if you take the 2 club lengths from the unplayable line and you still can't play it from there,
You can take a
you can
second
take an
unplayable.
additional penalty stroke, go
Right.
2 more club lengths.
Right.
Okay, I haven't seen that in here.
You have to drop the ball first.
You have to drop it.
You have to drop it, and then at that point, you'd say, I'm going to take another.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
So
You
it might,
gotta shoot the action.
you might drop it, and then it might roll 1 club length back. So you're not going to end up getting your 4 club lengths.
Yeah.
So you actually have to go
Could
through.
roll back to where it was later when
Right,
you first start
exactly.
marking.
Exactly. So you have to go through the process. You can't just
It's,
say,
Or you hope it hits and goes 2 more club lengths from where
and
you
then- yeah,
exactly. Or it's like
Maybe
taking
get your
taking
form.
relief from a cart path and there's a sprinkler box there, and when you take your relief for the sprinkler box, now you're impeded by the sprinkler or the cart path, and you're impeded by the sprinkler box. then you can take relief for that, but you can't take both relief options at one time.
It's kind of like the hazard line at Pheasant Run.
On
You
15,
drop onto the cart path.
left-hand side of
and then-
15, yeah.
Whereas we have one official just says, just take them all the way out. But don't tell Gene, don't tell Gene.
And MK would never know, right? He doesn't like that.
He doesn't like what?
Exactly.
So you know.
Let's
Yeah.
leave it like that.
Right.
The only exception here for a ball unplayable is if it's in a bunker. The ball needs to stay within the bunker. It needs to stay within the bunker when we're taking either our 2 club lengths or going on a line back with the flag. We can always go back for the last play from if that's outside the bunker. That's not a problem. But with those clause B or C, which is the 2 club lengths for the line back, it needs to stay within the bunker.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Any questions about the unplayable? All right. I got a couple more in here, so we'll go through rule 21 because we've still got some time, right?
Yep.
So, we'll go through cleaning the ball here. So there's 5 times when the ball can be cleaned. Does anyone want to try to name them? 5 times when we can clean a ball.
When it's marked on the green.
Sorry. 5 times that we can't. Sorry.
Oh,
5 times that we
makes a
that we
big world of
cannot
difference.
clean the ball.
when you're
Sorry.
lifting it in the fairway or someone's.
So if it's assisting or interfering with play.
Right.
Good enough.
That's 1. That's 1. There's 5 more. There's 4 more.
Identifying the ball.
To identify it. Yep.
When it's embedded in the bunker or whatever.
To see if it's
But then you
embedded. Yep. To see if it's embedded. That's 3.
That's 3.
See if it's unfit for play.
Yep. Good job, Sarah. To see if it's unfit for play. And there's one other one that's not in Rule 21, but it will be in
It'll be in the new rule,
the new rule.
whatever that number is.
Yeah. To see if it's in a burrowing animal hole.
Oh, yeah?
So you're gonna stick
that's the
your arm
other
underneath
time.
there to see if it is?
Well, you would just lift it to see if it's an actual burrowing animal.
Oh, at the
If it isn't,
beginning of it.
Right.
Not while it's in the hole.
Well, sure, yeah.
Well, if it's in the hole and you're in, and the animal's in there.
If your toe is big enough that you can reach in it, it's got to be a burrowing animal.
Jerry, you can do what you want, but I would say that the good rule of thumb for officials is don't put your hand in anywhere you can't see.
How about if you're a city kid, you doesn't know where the burrowing animal is?
There's a
You'll find out.
There's a decision in there. No, so I think that's they're actually changing that because people don't know what the heck a burrowing animal or a burrowing animal is. So now it's just going to be an animal hole going forward. But for this year, it's going to be a burrowing animal hole. So
Is that a cat and a dog?
no, it's not
No,
actually.
they don't burrow.
This year it's not, next year it is.
Yeah.
They dig.
Yeah. There's actually a decision there that talks about a dog that
Or a chicken or anything
that
else.
digs a hole, right? I'm pretty sure it's in Rule 25 somewhere. But
Where's your reference to burrowing animal hole? It's not in this year's rule, is that in?
No. it's in another place.
So it is.
Yeah, I think it's in Rule 25. So. You don't believe me, Craig?
Yeah, I believe it.
I'm
I
just
just
kidding.
wonder why another listed here.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the reasons that they're changing it is they're going to list out all the reasons why, or all the scenarios where you can't clean the ball. All right, so we got through all again to determine if it's unfit for play for identification purposes, in which case it may be cleaned only to the extent necessary for identification. So a lot of times the ball could be covered in mud and you're only allowed to move enough of the mud so that you can see if the ball is yours or not.
Right.
And then as I think Jerry said, or someone down there said, because it's assisting or interfering with play. And the other two are to see if it's embedded or to see if it's in a burrowing half. The player does clean the ball when they're not allowed to. It's a one-stroke penalty. And the ball must be replaced. If it's not replaced, they're going to get the general penalty for playing